Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to our second joint meeting of the Assembly and Senate Committees on Legislative Operations and Elections. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Chair Brittany Miller and all of our Assembly and Senate colleagues. We're thankful that our meeting schedules align and allow for these collaborative hearings. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Vice Chair Lang. Are they hearing me? Vice Chair Lang. I don't think they're hearing me. Just stay muted or unmute.
I think we might be having a little technical difficulty.
Yes.
I believe that we have all members present except for two. If we can mark those two members present as they arrive.
Well, which two are they? Shoot my mic off then.
For everyone who's on the hearing, I'd ask you to mute your mic unless you're speaking because we are getting some feedback. Before we begin our agenda item, I want to briefly explain how our virtual meetings will work today. As you know, for the time being, our legislative building is closed to the public due to the pandemic. As a result, all committee meetings are being held virtually, meaning committee members, staff, and presenters will be participating either through the Zoom application or by telephone. Remember, as most of you are doing now, you may view committee meetings online through the Nevada Legislature streaming service or on the Nevada Legislature's YouTube channel. As in previous sessions, all committee-related information is available on our NELIS system, or the Nevada Electronic Legislative Information System, which is accessible from the legislature's website. For this session, the public has three ways to submit public opinion or testimony. Please note that each mechanism is slightly different. Some become part of the public record, and others are opinions shared for legislators' information. The three ways for the public to participate are: 1, providing testimony via telephone during committee meetings; 2, submitting written testimony; and 3, using the opinion poll application. Testimony via telephone during committee meetings. To testify on bills or provide public comment during the legislative session, members of the public register on the NELIS system and then call in to the phone number provided. To register, you must click on the Participate button under the meeting that you're interested in and fill out the requested information. After registering, you must call the number provided at registration to be placed in the queue to testify in support, opposition, or neutral on a bill, or to provide public comment. Our broadcast and production services team will prompt you when it is your turn to speak. This is a first-come, first-served option, and testimony may be limited. The public can send in written testimony. Written testimony may be emailed as a PDF document to the following email address: SENLOE, and that's capital S, lowercase en, capital L, capital O, capital E, the @ symbol, lowercase letters, sen.state.nv.us, or testimony can be faxed to the following fax number: 775-684-6500. Again, that's 775-684-6500. Please, if you're going to submit written testimony, include the bill number that you're interested in, a clear title such as Testimony in Support of Senate Bill 555, and your name and any organization you might be with. All of these submissions become public exhibits posted on NELIS for your and the public's consideration and become part of the public record. The Nevada Legislature's opinion poll application has been used in past sessions, but now it's more prominently displayed and located in more places than before. It's available by clicking the Submit Opinion button near the date of each meeting. Through this feature, members of the public can provide comments or just indicate their position on a piece of legislation. The comments are only available to legislators and do not become part of the public record. For public comment, the committee will set aside 30 minutes at the end of today's meeting for anyone who wishes to call in. If you miss a meeting and want to know what happened, all committee meetings are recorded and posted on the legislature's website, usually by the next day. I know that was a lot of housekeeping information, so please do not hesitate to contact our committee staff or me if you have any questions or need any help. Today on our agenda, we have presentations from our local election officials. As many know, our county clerks and voter registrars throughout Nevada administer our elections pursuant to Title 24 of the Nevada Revised Statutes. Each session, the Senate and Assembly Committees on Legislative Operations and Elections receive a presentation from our local election officials to learn about the latest developments in elections management and implementation, review the previous election, and hear about the anticipated issues for this session. With us today, we are very fortunate to have Mr. Joseph Paul Gloria, our Clark County Registrar of Voters. We have Deanna Spicula, the Washoe County Registrar of Voters. Aubrey Rolat, our Carson City Clerk Recorder, who is in charge of elections in Carson City. And Sam Merlino, the Nye County Clerk. Registrars and clerks, I want to welcome you to the hearing, and we look forward to hearing from you. Please proceed when you are ready.
Good afternoon, Chairman Orenshaw, Chairman Miller. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and all members of the Senate Leg and Ops on the Assembly and Senate. It was a very challenging election where I'm happy to have the opportunity to give you some information related to what we experienced and some of the numbers that came out of the 2020 general election. Just to make sure, I'm hoping that the screen is coming through okay. Can I get an okay on that?
Yes, Mr. Gloria, I can see the PowerPoint that you've submitted as an exhibit on Nellis. Hopefully other members can see that as well and the public can see it, but it is on Nellis if anyone can't see it.
Thank you for the confirmation. And before I jump into the presentation, I'm going to try to keep it brief because I know that there are several people who have questions related from constituents and items related to the election. But before I get into it, I need to make sure that I express appreciation. It was one of the most challenging elections that we've ever supported in Clark County. And we received a tremendous amount of help from not only our local officials, but the state officials, the Secretary of State's office, legislators through the AB4 bill that was passed in the special session, and the federal government. Without that help, we could not possibly have been successful in this election. Just a little bit about Clark County. There are over 2.3 million residents residing within Clark County. We support over 1,150 precincts within the boundaries of Clark County. We perform all of the duties that are assigned to the registrar's office with only 38 full-time employees. There are 5,000 of the touchscreen voting machines that we make use of during the election time, and along those come with also 10,000 pieces of peripheral equipment that we also use to support elections. And we were able to increase our inventory of the electronic poll books, which are used to sign voters in at the polls, and that's now up to 1,800. I'm not going to go through all of these duties, but this is just a sampling of all of the responsibilities that my staff and I take care of here to make sure that we're providing the proper voting opportunity to all registered voters within Clark County. I'll just point out that we do support also municipal elections for the city of Boulder City, Henderson, Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, and Mesquite. This will be the last year that we have an election in the odd year with Boulder City, and everybody will be moving to the even cycles in 2022. In the 2020 general election, just to give you some numbers from Clark County, we had over 1,254,000 active registered voters who were registered and prepared to vote in Clark County. We had to send out over 1.2 million sample ballots to the voters in Clark. Over 36,000 of those were sent electronically. So that program continues to expand. We would very much like to see that number increase, as it is a savings to taxpayers, and those voters do get the benefit of receiving their sample ballot earlier than the ones that we put out into the mail. We processed and tabulated over 450,000 mail ballots as a result of the all-mail ballot language that was put into AB4. Over 974,000 people voted in the 2020 general election, and I have a breakdown there. Mail increased tremendously as a result of providing it to all voters, and as obviously as a result of the pandemic and voters being concerned about being safe and not getting out into the general public. That 453,000 is 10 times more than any other election we've ever processed here in Clark County. There were 7,237 voters who were notified of a need to cure, which was language that was provided in AB4. Of those over 7,000, 1,558 did not cure their ballot. In early voting, we had over 411,000, and on election day, there were 109,000 people. Big downturn on election day as a result of the mail ballots that went out. The next page I simply provide as a courtesy. Won't go through all the numbers here, but it just gives you a good indication of how the numbers have changed going back to 2004. And I've listed all of the presidential cycles leading up to 2020. But you can see that in Clark County, we've increased tremendously. There were 684,000 people who were registered in 2004 compared to the 1.254 million that we now support here in Clark County. We had consistently seen increases in early voting over the years, but with the mail ballot going out last year, we had a big increase in that number for the first time. Talk a little bit about the support and what we provided for the general election. During early voting, we had 35 sites over a 14-day period that were provided to the voters here in Clark County. 15 of those sites were permanent facilities, and I have to say that there was a tremendous change in what we were doing leading from the primary to the general. Because we could not use the same model of mobile teams that we had in the past as a result of the pandemic, county facilities stepped up in both the cities, all of the cities, Henderson and North Las Vegas, they all provided permanent community centers where we were able to set up for 14 days. We also made use of our permanent tents that have been very successful here in Clark County in providing voting in areas where we don't necessarily have a good permanent facility where we can provide voting. And as long as we have a hard surface and connectivity, we're able to do that. And then we still had 4 mobile teams because we needed to make sure that we're still serving the rural voters, the university students, and senior centers. As a result of AB4, the all-mail ballot, we processed ballots in 2 facilities. We did not have enough square footage in this facility to put on an all-mail ballot election for Clark County and also provide the early voting and election day opportunities, as we had to program machines and increase the amount of work in the mail ballot processing that occurred here in the facility. So we had to split up our staff and work in 2 different facilities, which was a huge challenge for us. Mail ballot drop-off sites were at all early voting and election day locations, which made it very easy and uncomplicated for voters to figure out exactly where they should go to drop off any mail ballots if they chose not to put it in the mail. And on election day, we did reduce the number of sites that we provided to 125. However, as we had estimated, as a result of the voters getting a mail ballot, we didn't have the need for a larger number of vote centers, and that seemed to serve the public well. Talk a little bit about same-day registration with everything that happened last year with the pandemic and going to all mail. I think a lot of people forgot that all of the clerks and the registrars were working hard to implement same-day registration for the first time statewide. For the general election, it was fully automated here in Clark County. All of those voters who registered same day, either through early voting or on election day, did vote provisionally because we wanted to make sure that we didn't have any issues in processing all of our election SDRs, and we wanted to make sure that we were upholding the integrity of what we were doing with that process. So as a result, we had 57,755 people who took advantage of the same-day registration, which I believe is a great start for that process. 26,000 of those updated their information. 7,600 did their online update, and then the in-person was 23,260. Talk a little bit about the system testing that takes place, and not only here in Clark County, with the exception of the Gillis machine down here below, but in all counties. We're required statutorily to create a certification board, which is made up of 3 members. There are 2 members that are of the different parties, Democrat and Republican, and then a nonpartisan member who participate in this testing. And in this testing, we set up scripts and provide them an opportunity to witness our loading of test ballots in all 3 ballot types, or tally types, I should say, that being mail, early voting, and election day. These 3 individuals committed to coming in for 3 separate tests, and one is done prior to early voting starting, one is done the day before election day, and we run that test again Wednesday after the election to make absolutely certain that our tabulation system is correctly tabulating votes. In all 3 cases, all of the tests passed, and the certification board was able to certify that tabulation was correct and that the correct software was loaded on all of our tabulation equipment and our voting equipment. We also tested the new equipment that we put into effect with assistance from the Secretary of State's office, and that was our Agilus mail ballot processing system. As a result of having this processing machine, we were able to process that 450,000 mail ballots that came in. If it had not been for this automated processor, we could not possibly have found the room or the staff to handle all of those bad ballots manually. And tests were run on that system prior to use in the election to ensure that it was functioning properly, the ballots were being sorted in the correct slots, and that the signature verification software was correctly matching signatures. After the election, for the first time, we participated in a risk limiting audit, which went very well. The Secretary of State led that effort, and we came through, and that audit passed 100% accurate. So all those 3 things were done to make sure that our system was accurately functioning for the election. Talk a little bit about voter registration maintenance. And the Secretary of State, Mr. Velashin, did an excellent job the other day when he presented to you a lot of this information you've already heard. So I'll just briefly go through. Through the Secretary of State, we utilize ERIC, which is the Electronic Registration Information Center. There are now 30 states throughout the country who participate. And through this process, we're able to match our state voter registration databases against those 29 other states to identify voters who have registered in other locations and help us to clean our voter rolls. We also utilize national change of address that comes from the United States Postal Service and through ERIC, and to identify people who may have moved, and which results in a federally required postcard that goes out to give that voter an opportunity to communicate to us that, no, I have not moved. Please keep my address the same, or yes, I have moved. Here is my new address, or please cancel me from the system. I no longer reside in Clark County. The voter record verification that goes through with every voter registration that runs through Social Security and DMV also is a good check, and it's part of our maintenance with every voter registration that goes through. The Nevada data, which is provided by the Nevada Secretary of State's office for cross-county checks on voter registration to make sure that we don't have any duplicate voters in counties, the 17 counties throughout Nevada. We get deceased updates from the Secretary of State, from ERIC, and the Nevada Vital Statistics. And there's no restriction on when we can remove those voters from the voter rolls once we receive confirming information that somebody has died. We do remove them from the voter rolls. And the inactivations that occur as a result of the change of address, those take place here in Clark County as well. And then, of course, we get updates from the general public who can call in to notify us that a family member has passed away, or update their registration, or say that they have moved and need to cancel their registration. complaints from voters that I want to briefly go through as well. There was quite a concern in providing results after the election. However, what a lot of voters didn't realize is that what we were doing was statutorily driven. As a result of having to wait for 7 days after the election for anything to come through the mail that's postmarked election day, we could not have finished tallying votes until a minimum of a week afterwards. And then with AB4 adding the cure process, which was 9 days after the election, there was simply no way we could possibly have reported any sooner than we did. And the ability that they gave us to read ballots earlier and also extend the canvass period gave us the necessary time that we needed, especially here in Clark County, to make sure we were prepared to canvass results. Voters also called in many times to complaining about their vote history not being posted, and we had to inform them that voter history doesn't get posted until after the canvass. We were able to confirm for them the status of their ballot, whether we had received it or not. However, vote history for early voting, election day, or mail ballots isn't posted until after the canvass is complete. We still suffer from third-party mailers that come into Clark County and throughout the state, really, trying to make an attempt to get voters who are eligible to register to vote, but appear not to be registered to vote. The problem that many of us suffer from is that the data that they use to send those mailers out, they often end up sending voter registration applications to people who are already registered, to people who no longer live there, or to people who are in fact deceased. And so we get a lot of voters who call in and they're confused, and they assume that that mailer has come from us, although it is clearly indicated on the envelope that it's from these groups, not from the election department. They are concerned that we have made a change to their voter record unknowingly. Electioneering during early voting and on election day, we received several reports. It was a very contentious election, and so there were some very motivated and, the correct word would be, they were very fired up at the polls. And so whatever side they were electioneering for, that we had several complaints out at the polls of arguments taking place during the early voting period inside. So we had to put a concerted amount of effort into monitoring that process and responding to the sites. The observation of the mail ballot process, everything that we provided here was according to law. And in fact, we went above and beyond what the law requires, which is the observation of vote tallying. And we let observers actually come into our processing rooms and observe what was going on in the Agilis mail ballot processing room, our counting board, and also in the rooms where we were doing manual verification of signatures. And we also had to deal with COVID restrictions there. So there were limitations as to the number of people that we could let into these rooms. Again, through the Secretary of State's office, Mr. Balashian did an excellent job the other day of emphasizing all the work that's being done for cybersecurity. It is an ongoing battle and one that won't end anytime soon. It'll be an effort that we have to put forth from here on out in elections to make sure that we're protecting our system. And the Secretary of State has played a great leadership role in providing us with training and funding to assist in all of our cybersecurity efforts. The Department of Homeland Security, we participated in many of the free assessments that they provide, and we are still designated as critical infrastructure. We get tons of information on nearly a daily basis from the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center and the EI-ISAC as well. And we are still making use of the Albert sensors that were provided by the Secretary of State 2 years ago. And what that piece of equipment allows us to do is monitor incoming traffic through the internet and through the notices that we receive from CISA and other federal groups and the state as well. We're able to identify concerning IP addresses that we need to make sure that we block from the system. I've already mentioned the Secretary of State providing training. They've also required us to put multi-factor authentication on all of our systems, which definitely improves cybersecurity. All of our staff members have to have a multi-factor authentication in order to get into the computer system and access anything that they do in the voter registration and, of course, the funding they provided. And Sean Raymeyer with the State Office of Cybersecurity also regularly reaches out and is very active in answering any questions and helping us with training as well. Our internal Clark County support is also tremendous here. There have been a considerable amount of resources that have been dedicated to protecting our networks, our poll books that are out in the field that need to access the data in order to sign our voters in for voting, for early voting on election day. They've made an extensive effort to protect that system, and I'm happy to report that there were no identified activities of foreign government penetration in 2020. Quickly, just some programs that are working very well here in Nevada. The automatic voter registration went off without a hitch. And again, as a result of leadership from the Secretary of State's office, and I'm going to compliment Ms. Amanda Payne in the Secretary of State's office for doing an excellent job of providing project management in that area. It went off on January 1st, and if not for the pandemic, these numbers would be even greater. But with limited access to DMV, we had 256,475 registrations come in through the automatic voter registration in Nevada DMV. You can see that the majority of those were updates to registration, but we also received over 85,000 new registrations. NOVA, the online registration, continues to be an outstanding service to voters. Implemented way back in 2011, voters with a Nevada driver's license are able to, on their own, in the comfort of their home, register to vote and make changes to their registration. We had over 216,000 of those. Again, the majority of those were updates, but there was a large number of new registrations, especially leading into the election, 94,284. It's more accurate, and it eliminates a tremendous number of man hours to manually enter paper forms into the system. Again, through the Secretary of State's office, the e-system allows an automated process for allowing overseas voters and military members to electronically register to vote through an FPCA and receive that ballot electronically. Sometimes in as quick as a 24-hour period, they're able to register to vote and send their ballot back electronically, which are duplicated and counted in the system. And they also went above and beyond in providing that service to disabled voters. Unfortunately, only a small number of voters took advantage of that. I believe it was less than 100 statewide and possibly 50 or 60 here in Clark County. But that is a system that continues to work very well. And I'm hoping to see the day, one day, when all 50 states are members of the Electronic Registration Information Center. Because once we can check our database against all 50 states, that will definitely be an improvement in securing and keeping our voting registration rolls clean. A few important issues looking forward, and I think the Secretary of State also did an excellent job of bringing these, so I won't spend too much time, but top-down registration is definitely a direction that we need to move into. Again, they've provided a project manager, and we're going to begin aggressively working on coming up with the information so that they can get a proposal put together. However, I just need to ask that the legislature is patient with the time period that it's going to take to implement this. It's not going to be easy, and as the Secretary indicated, it's going to take funding as well, but it's something that's definitely needs to happen here in the state of Nevada. With the future of mail ballot voting in Nevada, it was definitely necessary last year. Without mail ballot voting, as a result of the pandemic, we would not have had the turnout, and we would have had people exposing themselves at the polls unnecessarily. So I believe that it was a great move and the right move for last year. Although it was a tremendous challenge to implement, and there are many, many things we need to make better if we're going to move forward, I would also emphasize we need to move slowly with that as well, if we move forward with mail ballot voting to all voters. And poll workers will continue to be a challenge for us. It was compounded last year, obviously, again, because of the pandemic, but everything that we do now that makes access easier for voters in Clark County requires technology. And so we need a different kind of poll worker, and they need to be comfortable working with computer equipment and setting that equipment up so that we can function and get polling places open and up and running on time. And this is my contact information. I want to remind you all that we have an excellent team. Our legislative liaisons, Joanna Jacob, Justin Harrison, and Alex Ortiz. If you need to get a hold of me or need a conversation related to a bill, if you contact those three individuals, they will definitely have a way of getting hold of me. And with that, I'd be very happy to answer any questions that any of you have.
Thank you very much, Registrar Gloria. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the information, and thank you for conducting the last two elections under these unbelievable times with the pandemic and everything that we're facing. I do have some questions. First, I'd like to go to Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Gloria, so much for your presentation. I understand that these have been unprecedented times and that you and your team had to put in a tremendous amount of work to create such a safe and fair election for our community. So I really appreciate that. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the efforts that your office had to mitigate COVID-19 throughout the election so that we could prevent the spread at election sites, which I know were inundated with voters, although we did see a trend for less people waiting till election day to vote.
We could not have done it, Assemblywoman, without the tremendous amount of help that we received from our local fire department. Credit to our risk management department and Chief Steinbeck, who runs the MAC down here for us. They coordinated getting a ton of equipment. We were not short of anything that we needed in order to create a safe voting environment for all voters, for early voting and on election day. The Secretary of State as well, in the primary, provided assistance and funding so that we were able to create an environment where we created face shields for the voters as they came in so that there was no direct contact with them and the employees who were working the laptops. We created a safe environment for the voting machines and were able to socially distance them or create what we called a voting cubicle in many of our polling places where risk management deemed that it was safe for voters to be in a closer distance as a result of the partitions that we had in place. But the resources were there. We had help from many different agencies, and I'm very happy to say that we weren't struggling to get what we needed in order to make it a safe environment.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, and thank you to your team for all your efforts.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Torres. Thank you, Registrar Gloria. I now have a question from Senator Gansert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to go back to your voter registration maintenance slide. We've been participating in ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center, for quite a while. And I know you talked about the National Change of Address entity, NCOA, and those require postcards if there's a change of address, and voter verification, deceased updates, so on and so forth. What's the timeline for when you actually remove someone from your database, say that they do turn up as a duplicate in ERIC? How long does it take, or do you need to send out a postcard and reconfirm that they are registered in another state and that was their last registration? Or can you kind of walk me through the process for how you clear the database based on the information when you're crossing it with these different organizations? So that's my general question on that. And then the deceased updates, as far as like the frequency, if someone died on June 4th, when is that information updated to make sure that there's not a ballot that's potentially sent or available to someone who's deceased?
With the ERIC report, Senator Gansert, the Secretary of State helps us in sending those notices out for those people who have identified that may have moved and are registered in another state. We also look at the display, or actually when the activity took place. And so if we have a duplicate where we have a voter who's registered here and now showing up in another state, whatever the latest date is, that would be the registration that stays in place. And if we have one that's older, for instance, and we have somebody who's showing up in ERIC in another state, we would remove that voter. But for those who have been indicated that they've left, we have a cross-state or in-state and out-of-state mailer that has to go to that voter to have them confirm those three choices that I pointed out earlier that the federal government requires that no, they still registered at that address. 2, a yes, please change my address, so this is the correct address to change it to. Or 3, we have moved, and yes, please remove us from the voter registration rolls in Clark County. As for deceased, those reports come from the Secretary of State and Eric and from the general public. The Nevada vital statistics that come through, it happens at least weekly. And Eric, when they come through and match those reports to, I believe Mr. Velashin would probably be able to give you more information on the death reports from Eric, but we do receive those and we do take action on them as soon as we have the information and can confirm it.
Thank you, Ms. Gloria. And so as far as like timeline, so if you find a duplicate in Eric, how long does it take to remove someone from your database?
That should happen relatively quickly. If we find that they've moved, but it's not a duplicate, then it takes the 30 days. The federal government requires us not to make that voter inactive until that 30 days has passed.
Okay, I guess that's one of my questions too. When you go from inactive to, because sometimes we send ballots to inactive voters. So when are they completely off the rolls, or how do they roll off of inactive status?
Once you're inactive for 2 federal elections and have not voted, you're removed from the rolls. So we recently performed that activity in December for those voters who did not vote in the 2020 general, were inactive, and also did not vote in 2018 and were inactive.
And Senator Dancer, I appreciate all your questions. I just have a long line of members who want questions.
I want to thank Mr. Gloria and his staff also for all the work they did. I know it was extremely challenging. I meant to start with that instead of going right to the questions, because I know this was a difficult election given the different modes that we were using. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Registrar Gloria. Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you so much, Chair Orangel, and thank you, Mr. Gloria, for being here. I'm trying to understand this process of how you send, we had all these undeliverable ballots from the primary. And so how does that process work? Why were those people not placed in the inactive voters? I understand there's something involving Eric. And so I just wonder what you've done, what your office did regarding the updating of voter rolls with those undeliverable ballots. And then how many days passed between you receiving the report from Eric and your office sending out the mailers to the potential inactive voters to verify their status?
We got the report, Assemblywoman Dickman, we got the report for Eric late in the month of June. And so we immediately began to gather our reports and we're preparing to send that to the printer. We ran into a problem because it was right around the 4th of July holiday. And this year, the general election came very early in the month of November. And so we were unable to send out those federal notices until July 5th. And so we had to allow 30 days for those voters to reply. And so we missed the deadline. And so we were unable to get some of those voters who should have been placed inactive in the inactive mode. But even when they go to the inactive mode, they would still be eligible to vote if they showed up and updated their record. However, that was my fault for getting it in late.
And Assemblywoman Dickman, do you have a follow-up?
If I may, just quick.
Please go ahead.
So of those registered voters whose ballots were undeliverable in the primary, do you have any idea how many cast ballots or had ballots cast in their name in the general?
Well, even if they got a ballot and should have been inactive, we still had the same signature verification process in place. And as a result, we actually had 27,000 of those inactive voters that would have been inactive. They did get their ballot and they did sign it and send it back. They were verified and run through the same process that we do for every single mail ballot, and they were verified and were processed to vote. So as I mentioned earlier, the fact that a voter moves inactive doesn't make them ineligible to vote. In fact, because it's such a transient county here in Clark County, it's not unusual for people to be placed inactive and then show up during the election period and update their registration at the polls and then vote with their new address.
I have a question I apologize, Ms. Dickman. I just have a long line of questions here.
No, I was the same thing.
Oh, thank you. I have a question from Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
I can't hear you, ma'am.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez, your microphone might be muted. No, I apologize. We'll probably have to come back to you if you can solve the technical problem. I have Assemblyman Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. Mr. Gloria, thank you for being here with us this afternoon. I have sort of a two-part question, and I want to ask about your office's investigative processes, first specifically, and then more broadly. Specifically, I want to ask about the 2020 election in Clark County Commission District C. You would acknowledge yourself that that election could not be certified because the margin in that particular race was 10 votes. And there were 139 identified anomalies. Has your office identified what those anomalies were? If so, could you sort of describe the nature of these anomalies and what your office is doing to investigate them? And then more broadly, I want to know a little bit about your office's investigation processes in general. So what capacity does your office have to conduct investigations on matters of election integrity? For instance, how many investigative staff do you have? How many proactive investigations have you conducted? I would like to really know, do you have the ability to identify and investigate election irregularities on your own? Or is it only a case that you commence an investigation when a complaint is brought? So I know that's a lot there. I'm happy to restate any of those questions if necessary. Thank you.
Sure thing, Assemblyman. For the canvass period, what we do is go through an exercise where we need to identify any discrepancies at the polling place that occurred. And many cases, they're undocumented. And so we had 139, you are exactly correct, discrepancies that we identified in the Commission C race. I can give you an example of one type of discrepancy. It's sometimes a voter will come in, they'll sign in to vote, which means that my voter registration system for precinct, let's say 1001, ticks up by 1. Then they go to vote and for whatever reason, do not cast their ballot. Maybe they become confused. Maybe they look at the ballot and decide there's nobody there that they really wanted to vote for. I couldn't tell you why they decide not to vote. We call those fleeing voters. So now that precinct 1001 did not get a vote. And so I have a discrepancy there. I'm one up in my voter registration system compared to what we actually tallied in that precinct. There are many scenarios that go along those lines. If you'd like to talk with me directly, I can go into a long conversation with you on that. But those are the types of discrepancies that we identify. And in many cases, they're unknown. We don't have any documentation from our team leader that identify what may or may not have occurred. But we know we're one up or one down when you compare the voter registration roll to the actual votes that were tallied. And in a race that large, Commission C, it's very uncommon for there to be a margin of victory as low as 10. There is no election that ever occurs where we have zero discrepancies. There are human beings that are working at the polls and they make mistakes. The voters, they make mistakes and decide not to vote and leave. So there's no election that ever occurs where we don't identify discrepancies. As far as the investigative piece that you were talking about, I do not have staff that are assigned or any law enforcement officials that are assigned directly to my office. The Secretary of State does. So when we verify information that we need investigated, we will send all of our information to the Secretary of State, and they go through a process of making that investigation. And if they feel that it merits prosecution, then they move forward and do so.
Thank you, Registrar. Thank you, Assemblyman Matthews. Majority Leader Canizaro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Gloria, I have sat on this committee for at least a period of the last two sessions. and chaired this committee back in 2017. And I, again, just want to commend you as well as our other registrars for the really wonderful job that you do, and the dedicated work that really does go into not only running very large elections, but also doing so in a way that I think we can all have confidence in the safety and security of those. And especially with, I think, our election, which I note, highest turnout of any election, which I think is something to be very proud of. I know that when we've spoken in the past and we've heard some of these presentations, there's always been some Nevada to be one of the states that have not only a lot of accolades for how it runs its elections, but also for our ability to run safe and secure elections. And so I just wanted to kind of note some things that I saw in your presentation with multiple ways in which that machines are tested, that signature verification is tested, that you have a certification board, that there are 7 different ways that you're validating names, social securities, addresses, online registrations, Secretary of State data, cross-county checks, deceased updates, DMV records, Postal Service updates, moves, and that's a lot to process. And so I just wanted to kind of say thank you. A couple of questions that I had, because I think that there were some indications that somehow there may be voters who are voting in one state or another because it may take some time to update, or that maybe is giving a ballot that is, quote, counting in their name rather than someone casting their own ballot. So can you tell us just a little bit about how many instances that you have who voted in Nevada who were also found to have voted in other states, and just a bit about when you have someone who may be an inactive voter, that you're still going through those processes for verification, checking their records here, using those same different places to verify those. And then can you answer the question of whether there are discrepancies in other elections? So I would imagine that includes that's something regular that your office is pretty keen on counting, and that those are things in which you actually are not going in and casting a ballot for someone, for example, because they're an unknown voter.
Thank you for the question, Senator, and thank you for the kind words. I'll be sure and pass that on to staff. Just to make sure that I didn't confuse the issue, there were a group of voters that, because we missed a deadline, would have been inactive, but in fact, they did not get inactivated, and that's why they received ballots. Inactive voters don't normally receive a mail ballot, with the exception of the primary, which is the first and only time that I know that that's ever happened in Clark County. But active voters, regardless of where they're at, so many of our voters don't reside in Nevada, but they still claim legally that their residence is here in Nevada. So we send out of state ballots, but no matter what the ballot is, when it's returned to us, we run through the same process of verifying the identity, the signature match, and if they do not match, then we put it through the process of asking that voter to cure that ballot in this case. But in other cases, they would have to come in and sign an affidavit and provide information proving their identity for that ballot. So there are several checks in place that we use to make sure that we're ensuring the identity of the voter when they come back. Whether that there were voters that voted in other states, again, that's the benefit of the reports that we receive from the Secretary of State. I'm not aware of duplicate voters from state to state. What we had in the issues that we provided to the Secretary, which is a very small number of voters, were some instances where, according to our system, we had some voters who may have voted twice. But voting in multiple states, again, I really hope that one day we're able to get all 50 states working from one system where we're able to very quickly and efficiently make those checks and prevent those things from happening.
Thank you, Registrar. Thank you, Majority Leader. I now have a question from Assemblyman Levitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Gloria, for your presentation, for being with us today. You'd mentioned the signature match program a couple times, and I guess my question is could you kind of run us through that process? briefly, and if there was anything that you saw that could be improved upon in that process moving forward.
Well, with any process, when you have more resources and more staff, there are things that you can do to bolster the effort. But just to give a brief description of exactly what happens, and there was a lot of news surrounding the Agilis signature matching software that was used. There were several groups who were incorrectly reporting that there was a percentage setting on the system, and that is absolutely not the case. There is a setting that the manufacturer sets for all users that runs from 1 to 100. The default setting for that machine is 50 when it comes to any customer. Different jurisdictions are going to have different quality signatures in their database. Unfortunately, here in Nevada, we get a lot of our signatures from DMV, and they do not yet have the technology to capture signatures at the 200 dots per inch quality. So as a result, a lot of the signatures that we have on file didn't meet the system's requirement for DPI in order for it to match a signature. So when we ran tests leading into the election, what we do is run a test set of ballots through with signatures that definitely do not match, so that we can test the system to see and make sure that it's only qualifying signatures that are a definite match. For us here in Clark County, we moved the default setting from 50 to 40. And at 40, my staff and I were very comfortable that every signature that was coming through and verified as matching did in fact match. So that's how that system software works. For the any other ballot that was kicked out, it now kicked into the manual process where we have teams of bipartisan workers who look at every single signature. There's 3 steps there, and then ultimately no signature goes through without management taking a look at it to verify that it should not have been rejected. But it's a long process. There are several steps in place, and those signatures are thoroughly checked throughout.
Thank you, Registrar Gloria. Thank you, Assemblyman Levitt. I now have a question from Senator Buck.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair Orange Hall, and Mr. Gloria. Thank you so much. I just wanted to go on record saying, I want to speak about the truth. And the truth was that hundreds of thousands of legal votes were cast and counted in Nevada's 2020 election. And it is also true that there were some problems, admittedly. And thank you, Mr. Gloria, for sharing, that the election was not perfect. And I, along with several of my colleagues, want to get to the heart of the problems, to fix them. I'm not here to undermine democracy or spread false information or anything. I'm just here to stand for transparent, free, and fair elections. And so with that, a couple of things. So there were about 1,500 deceased voters that voted in the election. And so I know that you had mentioned that the Secretary of State is in charge of that. And so I would just kind of wanted to bring that to your attention, because when it's compared to the Security Administration Master Death File, the public obituary data updates and the Credit Bureau deceased data file, why were those counted?
Thank you for the question, Senator. And I'm sorry that I have to contradict you. I received no reports or any listing to verify on deceased voters who actually voted. Now, there was a lot of misinformation that was provided related to a lot of activity here in Clark County. I have to tell you that from the start, leading into the canvass and with all of the attention that we had here in Nevada as a result of a close election and in the ultimate race, the presidential race, we had a lot of attention going on here, and there were a lot of court cases that were filed here in the state of Nevada where they had ample opportunity to provide proof and provide listings with actual names that we could verify. They provided us with a list of 3,000 people who they said lived out of state and should not have voted here. However, it's not uncommon to have people who don't actually reside here. The military had that benefit. They can claim Nevada as their residence because that's what they want. There are thousands of students that go to school away from Clark County, but they fully intend to return and they want to continue to vote here and don't register in another county. With that list of 3,000, we personally verified a large number of those and determined that they were military and student voters. A member of the media went through all 3,000 of those and verified the same. So when we were provided information, we looked into it. We would not be doing our job if we didn't. So when you say there were 1,500 people that voted who were known to be deceased, I would like to see that list if you have it.
Okay, that's great. And maybe we'll get that to you. Yeah, I wondered about that. Also, I was one of those candidates that knocked on a lot of doors where people were dead. They were on the file, the voter file. And so I knock on their door and then it'd be a kid or that they were deceased. And so that's kind of where that's coming from too. Also, is there a way?
Buck, I appreciate your question. Just please, if you could limit one more question, I've got 3 more members with questions.
Is there a way that the election can end on election day? Because if you followed my race in SD5, it was, 13, 14, 15 days later that it actually came to a culmination. And so if there's a way that this body can help in, drafting legislation that, things need to be in by election day or move election day back, I guess, to the 15th. And so that way we all kind of know, because that was an unfortunate timeline. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Buck. Thank you, Registrar Gloria. Appreciate your questions. I have a question now. Assemblywoman Gonzalez, I think, has fixed the technical problem.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Hi, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, District 16 for the record. I just wanted to reiterate a lot of what my colleagues have been saying. Thank you so much for the phenomenal job that you all did during such unprecedented times in our community, executing such, one of the largest elections in history. And so thank you. And please let your staff know that we said thank you as well. My question is, can voters in Indian colonies inside jurisdictions of the city vote for municipal, sorry, I can't say that word, officers? So for example, the Las Vegas Paiute tribe, can they vote for municipal officers?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman, and the kind words. Certainly, there is a reservation that resides within the city of Las Vegas, and they are eligible to vote for municipal officers.
Awesome, thank you so much. And then just a quick follow-up. Is there any way that we're able to see a sample ballot of those?
You mean a map, Assemblywoman, of the districts?
Like a sample ballot of folks who are in the colonies, like their ballots.
Well,
I guess my question stems from, is this just in Clark County or in Northern Nevada, like folks who are on tribes, can they vote in those races as well? Or is this by county?
You would have to ask the other clerks because they would be more familiar with the residents in their county. But I could certainly tell you what district they reside in here in Las Vegas. Let me make sure and make a note of that.
Thank you so much.
Gloria. Thank you, Assemblywoman Gonzalez. That might be appropriate for the other clerks. I apologize. I've just got some other questions. I have Senator Lang, who's been waiting very patiently.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Gloria, thank you so much for all the hard work you and your staff have done to help make this election work for everyone. My question just goes back to the voter file. So I know that you have a voter file and there are organizations that have voter files. And I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know when I was chair of the state party, we had the van and we had to upload the information on a regular basis to get the most current data. So sometimes when we are, as candidates or as elected officials, are getting data to go out and walk and talk and call to people, the data that we may have through our party or a different organization may not be the same data that you have or the most current. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it depends on where you get the information. The information is publicly available on our website. We also provide walking lists by district, but there are many organizations that take the public information off of our website and then work with it so that they can sell it as political information to some candidates. But if they're not being diligent about keeping that list updated according to current registration, then you would get information that does not match up. That is definitely the case, and I've heard that before. But I would always encourage candidates, as long as you have an election geek on your staff, that information is for free. You can get it directly off of our website and sort it any way that you want it. And then if you have issues, you can contact us directly.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Thank you, Registrar. Thank you, Senator Lang. I have a question from Assemblywoman Howdigi.
It was covered, Chair. Thank you.
It was? Okay, thank you. Then.
Oh, but if I could just take the opportunity, since you called me, I just also want to express my thanks to Mr. Gloria and all the other election officials on such a great job this election cycle. It was difficult, but you guys just did a phenomenal job. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman.
Thank you. Speaker Frierson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Gloria. I won't repeat all of the accolades, but you know that we are well aware of how hard your folks work. I really have two questions. I'll save the bigger one for last for you. But the first is, can you speak to the difficulty that you had finding volunteers to work the polls, and to what extent expansion of opportunities helped address that? And then also, and also along those lines, are you concerned moving forward about the ability to get adequate volunteers to work polling places if we do not have the broad spread out of options for voters?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. I think as election officials, and I'm sure that my colleagues would agree, we're always concerned about poll workers, but last year was a very unique year. So let's pray that we've left the pandemic behind us. We didn't have enough poll workers to provide the number of polling places that we initially indicated we were going to have, which is one of the reasons I was very pleased to see that we got the permission to send out the all-mail ballots, and then we slightly reduced that number. Once I made it my local leaders aware, they stepped up and they put the word out, and we did get quite a few people, and so we were able to staff fully those 125 and all of our early voting sites. In the future, the more concern that I have, as long as we don't have another special situation like the pandemic, is technology. It's more difficult to work the polls now. We used to have over 1,000 people who sat with a paper roster. So all they had to do was have the ability to flip through the roster, find the voter's name, and have them sign in. It's not that way anymore. We have to do it electronically, and in order to give the vote center process to the voters. So my concern in the future is finding qualified workers to come in, and we'll definitely continue to work hard, and hopefully my local representatives here and leadership will step up again and provide me with some access to poll workers like they did in August.
And so if I can follow up, Mr. Chair, briefly. So, I mean, I guess the crux of my question was, did expanding the options with mail and drop off help alleviate the concern about having needed more volunteers, but for that, those options that would have increased volume at polling places?
I apologize, Mr. Speaker. I didn't make that clear. I think if we had not gone all mail, we would have been in real trouble finding enough workers for the number of polling sites that I would have needed had I not been able to send a mail ballot to all voters. That ability to provide all voters mail ballots saved us. And the turnout is evidence that we made the right decision. 453,000 people in Clark County chose to vote that way. And had they not, we would have been swamped at the polls and unable to serve them.
Thank you. And my last question, and the big one, and you've been talking about this, as has the Secretary of State for some time. Can you talk more about what you described as the top-down system and what that would do to solve challenges that you have? I mean, obviously, there's a cost involved. If we want, election results sooner, you got to pay for the ability to be more efficient with our system. So that costs money. So could you just describe what that top-down system is, how that would and how that would help you with your job?
Certainly. It's going to tremendously improve the integrity of the process, number one. All 17 counties right now handle voter registration bottom up. We manage the voter registration files here in all of our counties, and then we send it up to the Secretary of State for them to consolidate up there. A top-down system would allow one database to be available for all 17 counties that we would all draw information from. So duplicate voters, the possibility for people to be voting in two locations from county to county, all of those kinds of things can be eliminated, and it's just much more efficient. We can draw accurate reports and cut down on any nefarious activity with the top-down voter registration system. But I do have to say that based on, I think what was the other half of your question, Mr. Speaker? You said...
how this would help you. It was really just describe the top-down system and then how it would help you, in what ways it would help you do your job.
I think you mentioned something about reporting quicker, and what has to change there is if you want to give the mail ballot voter an opportunity for that ballot to come in if it's postmarked on election day, and for us to wait 7 days, well, we can't possibly be done any sooner than that. But the top-down would allow us not to have to wait for the state after that to verify that people hadn't voted in other counties. It could speed it up by a couple of days, but having to wait for that ballot to come in a week later, and then if you continue to have the cure process run 2 days after that, I only have 3 days to put a mountain of data together to put my canvas together for Monday. So we might be able to shave a little bit off, but that's what really extended the reporting time.
Thank you again, Mr. Gloria. And the cost is not yours. I believe the Secretary of State has, for a couple of sessions now, addressed the costs associated with transitioning to a top-down. So I think that'd be more appropriate for her. I appreciate your being here and for your, I think, even-handed way of handling all of these challenges without. If you are breaking a sweat, we don't see it. So thank you. Have to.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Registrar Gloria. Thank you for taking on this monumental task of making sure people could still participate in the democratic process during these unprecedented times of the pandemic. Thank you, members, for all your questions. We'll now move on to Deanna Spicula, the Washoe County Registrar of Voters, who will present before the committee, and she has posted some exhibits on the Nellis system.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Registrar. Thank you for being here today.
Wonderful. Good evening, of course, Chair Orenshaw and Chair Miller. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this time to be able to present information on Washoe County and how we administer elections, and of course going over the last election. So I'm going to just share my screen, and hopefully this will you'll be able to see my presentation.
I don't see it now with any
other.
Other
Hold on a second. Yeah, I gotta, there's some chat I need to do. There it is. All right, can you see it now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, wonderful.
See it, please let me know.
All right. So again, thank you for allowing us to present information about the administration of elections for all of us in the state, but also for me particularly with Washoe County. I want to give a brief thanks to Joe as he bears a lot of the burden. He's already presented a lot of information to you. So I'm going to try not to duplicate the information he's already provided and provide some other aspects of what we do for elections. So yeah, I guess we'll just get started here. For Washoe County, I have the statistics up about basically our county, how many registered voters we have, about approximately the population within Washoe County, and the number of elected offices that we oversee, the number of precincts we have, and the number of registered voters, which is, growing tremendously. Our growth has been really incredible over the last couple of years. And as I see development going in, as we continue to move forward, we're seeing that we're going to be growing in population quite a bit over the next few years. So we see that trend going up. Oh, sorry. Can you see this video?
Yes.
I don't think I can make it any bigger, but yeah.
Members, if you can't see it, please let me know, but I can see it.
So some of the things I'd like to highlight, and that was one of them, is our adoptive polling place program. It was something that we've had for quite a while, but we revamped it and we were really pushing to expand the adoptive polling place program. And I think that's one of the large successes that I see that we accomplished throughout this last election cycle. Of course, when we started all these initiatives that we wanted to do going into the next election cycle, we started them before COVID was something that was of concern. So the fact that I believe that some of these internal department goals that we achieved, and especially reaching out to poll workers and doing the adoptive polling place program. Those are some of the successes we actually saw, even in light of COVID. We had people who were volunteering to be poll workers who were doing so because they didn't want their parents or their grandparents who have been doing this and contributing and volunteering as a poll worker. They didn't want them out there doing this, so they themselves, the younger generations actually really came forward and they volunteered. And it was such a, in the end, we had a lot of organizations decide to adopt a polling place. So we are really proud of the adoptive polling place program, but also the fact that we had so many poll workers that of younger age groups to actually, they were volunteering to make sure that their parents and grandparents didn't have to volunteer for the safety with COVID out there. So definitely a different look that we saw from the last election. And that's wonderful. I hope to continue. Hopefully they got the bug and they're going to continue to volunteer. So we're really hopeful. We remain in contact with them. We have a quarterly newsletter that we send out. We have poll worker information sessions that we bring people in, and if they want to give us feedback or tell us what they need, we want to bring them in. And so hopefully we're getting a new mix of people that we've normally not had. So that's a success, I think, from this year. Some of the things that my department did, we launched an interactive mobile-friendly sample ballot so people could actually use their mobile device to actually mark their sample ballot and bring it with them to the polling locations. We had instructional videos for voters and poll workers. So for voters, we had how to mark and return your absentee ballot. We had information on how to vote on the I-6 primes. And for our poll workers, we launched a whole new program for them to be able to see videos on how they, the processes that they're going to be overseeing and having an online poll worker training as opposed to in person. We still provided in-person training opportunities for them so they could get used to working with the equipment and knowing how that functioned. So those were proctored by some of our poll workers. So we had that in-person aspect to our poll worker training, but a lot of it was done virtually with webinars and other virtual tools that we had available to us. So that was something that, again, we want to continue doing that, even though we may not, we're in COVID situations now, we're in the state of emergency. But even when we get out of that state of emergency at some point, we are going to rely on these videos because the poll workers can return back to them again and again as much as they need to be able to get the information that they need. They can take the trainings online. They can do all that at their own pace. And again, can return to those to have access to that information as they're getting their poll worker training and making sure that they know what they're going to be doing out at the polling locations. We also launched a new results reporting dashboard. With that, we also had part of the results reporting dashboard, and this is something that our technology services department had, they built this from the ground up, is that, and also our interactive wait times application. So people were able to go online, see the estimated wait times at certain locations, and be able to decide where they wanted to go and vote depending on location and wait times. But it was also a tool for us. So we had communication with our poll workers in real time. We had applications like them being able to say when they're open and closed. They could actually put tickets in for support if they needed equipment or other, just supply support. They could put that into this ticketing system within this application. So it really, for the first time, I felt really connected with our poll workers out in the field. We knew what they needed. They were able to report things they needed. We were able to track it on our end. We were able to assign it to certain people to handle. So we knew that not only was a report coming in from a poll worker, but we were also able to capture that and send responses and know who was going to respond. So we didn't have duplication of effort where there was somebody on the phone with the poll worker and there was also a ticket in. So multiple people or multiple entities were working on a situation. We knew, we could see it in our dashboard. It was just such a great, tremendous help for us. So I do have to give a shout out to my technology services department and with Washoe County. They went above and beyond by both making that the results reporting dashboard and the what we call the wait times application, which, like I said, was more than just wait times. They did a tremendous job, and we are so thankful for that improvement in how we go about providing elections. Of course, with COVID-19, we had our all mail-in and in-person voting for the general election. We were able to procure all the PPE, the personal protective equipment that we needed for our office and our poll workers to make sure that our voters and our staff were well protected. If somebody did want to appear in person to vote, we had sanitizing stations. We had our poll workers who had their process for when they would sanitize equipment, make sure that the ICX primes and anything else that the voters touched as far as checking in, that everything was sanitized after each contact with that equipment, that we kept our poll workers safe and we kept our voters safe. So I'm very, very proud of the record that we had in this last election cycle, that not one person from my office, even temporary staff and permanent staff, were infected, and none of our poll workers were infected with COVID during that time. I want to stress that the protective measures we took in Washoe County, I would like to think that those were definitely a part of keeping our poll workers safe and our staff safe and the voters. Some things we did with the COVID-19 funds that we were allotted is we purchased a high capacity envelope sorter, which was very instrumental in helping us be able to process absentee ballots, again, an amount that we've never seen before. Never dealt with that many ballots coming back to our office. This envelope sorter was a tremendous help to us being able to process those incoming mail-in ballots much more efficiently than we would have been able to do otherwise. We had our drop-off locations that we added. Again, something new for our county. But we had quite a showing of people dropping off their ballots, either at a polling location or at one of our drop-off locations. And so I don't know the future of that for us in the state and for Washoe County, but those drop-off locations were highly popular, whether it be at a polling location or being able to drop it off at just a regular drop-off location that we had at most of our grocery stores. We'll have to see, but it was hugely successful, and I believe our voters really did like that option being available to them. So again, going forward, depending on things, the one thing that we did note that could be improved is voter outreach and voter education. We had a small amount of time to reach out to our voters and inform them of all the changes, the COVID restrictions and everything that needed to be followed. Again, voter education and outreach is always a hard thing for us election officials because we have certain means. We do online, we post our stuff on our websites, we do a little bit of social media. We have direct mailers. We have our media partners that help us, but not every voter receives their information the same way. So sometimes that is hard to make sure that we're reaching everybody and all the voters that we need to reach. It's very difficult in this day and age. So I just want to bring some election statistics. Some for the 2020 primary and the general election. Again, just the number of registered voters by party. And this is the turnout that we saw by tally type, mail-in, early voting election day. We do tend to lump our mail-in and our absentee ballots together, especially in this year. because everyone was considered a mail-in voter. But as we see here again, mail-in for this election was, for the general election, was higher than we would normally see. But again, going to the COVID restrictions and a lot of people preferring to not go to a in-person voting location to minimize their exposure is definitely, you see that in these numbers. This is not typical. But for this election, this is what we're seeing, and that early voting is still extremely popular. For the most part, over the last, 10, 15 years, early voting has gained in popularity. Election day is still usually lower than early voting as far as turnout. And we see that again with this election, that most people either decided to vote by mail or vote in person during early voting. And again, we did have a historic turnout for the 2020 general election. Again, we're very proud of that. Even with a pandemic, we have this historic turnout. So again, couldn't be more proud of that. So for 2020 general election, this is just the statistics about how many polling locations we had, how many early voting election and election day workers that we had. And again, just at the bottom, the number of same-day registrants that we had just in the 2020 general election. And here, again, are just some more statistics about the election, how many ballots we mailed out, how many were returned. Of course, the primary was a little bit different because we only had the one location. So I wanted to notate that at least, but at least this shows the little bit of the breakdown of how many ballots we actually had returned and that we had to process. So here I have mail-in and absentee ballots challenged. This is at the end of everything. This is what we're challenged and we're never resolved. You can see it by total number challenged, ballots not received in time, no signature, the breakdown. So of course, if anybody has any questions about this, I'm happy to answer. So we had a lot of mail ballots undeliverable in the primary election. After that election, we did reach out to voters. We sent confirmation cards out to those who were in that mail undeliverable category for that election. And so that could be some of the decrease in the number of mail ballots undeliverable in the general election, because for those that were on the list in the primary, we did not mail ballots to. We mailed them a notice. We tried to reach out to them to get corrected information, but if they did not respond, we did make them inactive so they wouldn't be mailed material, of course, that they're not going to receive. So this little bit of voter registration and list maintenance, I know this has been a topic that everyone is talking about. And supplementally, I did upload a document that was compiled by NACIO, the Nevada Association of County Clerks and Election Officials, regarding voter registration list maintenance. Some of the information, there are, of course, laws, federal and state laws that we have to adhere to during these processes. Just because we're notified that somebody has maybe moved or registered in another state, we can't automatically cancel their registration. There is a process that we have to go through, again, dictated by federal and state laws that we must follow, and we do, for making sure that we're reaching out to those voters, giving them an opportunity to either confirm their registration or supply us an update. If they do not respond to us, we can make them inactive. But again, that we can make them inactive, but they have to remain inactive for 2 federal election cycles until we can cancel their record. Um, so I have some numbers here just for Washoe County. Some of the voter registration list maintenance numbers that we have done. And this is just over 2019 and 2020. The number of notices we sent, confirmations returned. You guys can read I don't need to read every line to you, but it just gives you the perspective of how many people we are reaching out to, that we're trying to get information from to update their voter registration, and how many either we get an affirmation for cancellation that they have moved, how many we get back undeliverable, and how many we just don't know. We don't hear back from them. And of course, at that point, we do make them inactive until we get confirmation from them, either at a polling location during an election cycle, or an updated registration or change of address form. Then we will update their information. Just a quick, cybersecurity update. Again, like Joe had stated, we work with the Secretary of State's office and Department of Homeland Security. We've had the Albert sensor installed, and it has been monitoring our information across the network. We have completed our isolation of our voter registration database prior to the general election. So our voter registration database is not accessible from any outside, there's no Wi-Fi or no landline or anything connected. We are completely air-gapped for our voter registration system. It is accessed only. We have multi-factor authentication that we have recently installed. So to access our voter registration database, or to be able to do anything in our election system, you have to have that MFA access that has been set up and dedicated. And again, our registration database is not connected to an outside source. There's no way that somebody can actually get into our system because we are air-gapped. We are not functioning with our election database in any way, shape, or form that anybody can actually get into it. So and we further access or limited access in our systems. So all of our computers and hardware in the office, we have put USB plugs into, so nobody can come in and insert a non-authorized USB device, whether it be even somebody trying to charge their phone or their tablet. There's no way that they can access those drives. So again, it's a physical preventative thing that we have gone through to make sure that people can't access our systems. We have our acceptable use policy, and as of now, we as a county, we're going to a .gov domain. We of course have to wait for the county to fully transition, and from my understanding from my last update, it will be done. This should be completed within the next 6 to 9 months, possibly a year. And again, we continue to participate with the ISAC groups. I have one person on staff who monitors the information coming from them. And of course, if there's anything relevant, especially to elections, they notify not only myself, but also our technology services department. Again, some of the continuing improvements looking towards 2022. We'd like to make some improvements to the same-day registration process. Some of the things that we had issues with is our poll worker training. This was an entirely new process for them, and understanding when somebody is eligible to do same-day registration and how they process them in our workflows seemed to be an issue with some of our poll workers. And of course, voter education. For the most part, I think voters did embrace it quite easily, but there's always improvement that we can make to make sure that they understand the deadlines and what they need to do in order to engage in that same day registration process. Some of the things that we did with our website, again, I cannot compliment my technology services department in Washoe County for the work that they did. They created the election results dashboard, which I have a little bit of a screenshot here, but it includes mapping, it includes tables, it includes straight statistics, everything that they did. I mean, and it's still on our website. If you want to click into that, the Washoe County dashboard for results, you can look by district, state, local, district offices, and you can see all these stats that they have made visually appealing and also statistically accurate in the tables. So just a kudos to them. Some of the things that we want to improve going forward, and I did get a lot of feedback regarding the information that we were displaying as opposed to what the Secretary of State's office has. Some of that, again, going to maybe the future of working with the Secretary of State's office and getting that top-down voter registration system in place is there is a delay between when we have information that we have at base one. We have that information, and when we have to upload it to the Secretary of State's office, then they have to compile all that information from all of us, the different counties, and then make that available. So there's a lag. There's at least a 24-hour lag between when my registration database has information to when the Secretary of State's office gets that information. And then there's however long it takes them to compile that and then publish it. There's another delay there. Having that system, you're not going to have that delay. It's going to be in real time. Again, that's another one of the handouts that I provided as well. It's just the implementing that centralized voter registration database and making sure, for us moving forward, a top-down system is really the way to go. It would improve voter list maintenance. It would improve results reporting. It would just improve so many things that we do. Again, that we're sharing information now between, we're as a county, we're we're giving that information to the state, and then they're doing what they have to do with it, and then they're providing it to the public. With a state-wide, a centralized system, it's all in real time. There wouldn't be that delay in us uploading and then being able to process that information and provide it to the public. So that is something I'm, very eager to push and would like to see happen quickly is getting that voter, the top-down voter registration system in place in the state. Again, for Washoe County, we're preparing for future growth. We're increasing our outreach to voters. There's many different ways that we're doing this, but some of the things that we're doing is just, of course, utilizing media, working with the county communications team, making sure that we're getting that information out that we need to the voters in a timely manner. Also, just making sure that we're working with organizations throughout our community to provide information to those groups so they have the information to provide to their voters. We also participated in a language assistance program that was conducted through one of the national organizations. And again, that's, making sure that we're providing and being conscientious of language, minority language issues in our county. So following up with that, again, poll worker recruitment is always an issue on Oddly, I was very pleased to see the amount of people and voters who or poll workers who volunteered in this election. We had such an outpouring of people wanting to support our elections for this cycle. That's not typical. So we usually have a very hard time recruiting poll workers. It wasn't easy, but I was, very pleasantly pleased to see, organizations reaching out to adopt a polling place and, some other younger people signing up to be poll workers again, a lot of times to make sure that their parents and grandparents weren't the ones out there. They decided to take that on themselves and make sure that they helped people, in the tradition of their parents and grandparents, help those express their right to vote. So, again, last thing I think I have here is reapportionment and redistricting. We're looking at going into this, shortly. My first job in the elections world was doing redistricting in 2011. So it's a daunting task. It's something that, we do every 10 years. So it's something that will take a lot of resources and a lot of attention as we get close to actually getting the data so we can do the reapportionment and redistricting functions that we need to do and make sure that our voters end up in the correct districts for which they are eligible to vote. All right. With that, I'm going to sign off and pass it on to, I believe, Aubrey in Carson City.
Pardon me, Registrar Gloria, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for working so hard to make sure people in Washoe County could vote during this unprecedented pandemic. Members, any questions for Registrar Gloria from Washoe County? I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you very much. We'll now go to a presentation from Aubrey Roloff, the Carson City Clerk Recorder, who is in charge of elections and maintaining the voter rolls for the urban county of Carson City.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Members who can't hear, please chime in.
I speak really softly, but I'm going to try to speak really loud for you guys. So I just wanted to say thank you for hanging in there with us this late. We have a couple rural counties that just want to present brief presentations about how elections are administered in the smaller jurisdictions. It's always a hard act to follow. Joe Gloria and Nicola, they do wonderful presentations, very in-depth. So I don't want to overload you, but I do have a small presentation to give to you.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
All right, technology is one of the challenges for us rural counties. As many rural counties do, the Carson City Clerk, I have multiple departments and divisions. The following slide shows how my departments are separated and the staffing that I have for each. We are very restricted as far as our staffing abilities. And so to administer elections it takes all hands on deck from all of our staff as well as our election workers that always step up. Another challenge that we face here in Carson City is we share our information technology department across all city departments. This is not isolated to just Carson City. Many rural counties share their IT department countywide or even across multiple counties. Where this becomes a challenge is when we have technology enhancements. We need to coordinate very closely with our IT department to make sure that we get on their schedule to have the enhancements done within our department. And we don't really have technology-based staff to work with IT as a liaison. So we're having to learn the technological terminology and functionality in addition to our other duties here. Our website design and maintenance is also done here on site. We have become limited masters on website design. And again, we need to also learn the functionality and the terminology that comes along with website design and maintenance. And during an election, that's very important because that is our biggest voice to getting information out to the voters. Our current building infrastructure, we are limited in that we're outgrowing our locations. And a lot of times that requires IT to work with us very closely to get us additional networking if we need to hire additional staffing, or even have just additional technology that we need for our current staff. That's a challenge that we face here in the rural counties. The next few slides, I'll just go through really quickly. These are our voter statistics, our election statistics for Carson City. As you can see, the 2020 general election, our registration was up. I think a lot of that was due to the automatic voter registration. We did have a total of 549 who took advantage of the same-day registration process here in Carson City, and 19 of those were unable to be processed as the voter did not provide the qualifying identification document. But I think that's a good turnout for having the first implementation of same-day registration. We had a 78.82% turnout for the general election, which was lower than I thought we would be. Our 2016 general election, as you can see, was much higher. I'm not sure what the reasoning was for that, but we still had a good turnout considering we're in the middle of a pandemic. The election was new to our voters, the process of it, and I think that was a good turnout for the conditions we were under. Our mail ballots that we sent, we did have a lot of feedback because when we posted, our rejection rate looked high. And that's because those individuals were coming to our polling location to vote in person. So when they were surrendering their mail ballot to actually vote in person, it would show up on our system as a rejected ballot so that they were able to be issued an in-person ballot. So that number is inflated just due to that. The signature cures, we had 310 that required a signature cure. Of that, 235 were successful and had left 75 that were unresolved. Some of the challenges that we've identified, we agree with our colleagues on, and I'm not going to go into all of them again, but staffing was definitely difficult during this election. We did not know how to staff an in-person polling location, as well as our mail ballot boards here at the office. It was hard to know how many people were going to turn out either way, which made it difficult to schedule appropriate staffing at each place. Election worker training was definitely on the fly. There was a lot of new procedures and processes that we had to come up with while we were already administrating the election. That was difficult for our workers, and they really stepped up. However, it was hard to keep them consistent because each day we would have new workers and we had to go through that new training with them each day. The same-day registration, I share the concerns with Registrar Spicula and Gloria. There was a lot of deadlines for our voters. It was confusing. It took a lot of time to explain those to our voters. And it was also very hard for our election workers who were new to this process to try to explain that to our voters. So we did have a lot of frustration there. It's nothing that we can't overcome with more voter outreach and education, but it definitely slowed down some processes for this election. And finally, the election results. That too was a very large frustration factor for our public. They didn't understand that the legislatively passed extended deadlines didn't allow for us to do a final tally on election night when our voters are used to getting those unofficial results on election night. So I think we can work on doing some voter outreach for that. But we did field many degrading and many times hostile emails and telephone calls. There was a lot of, verbal threats that we were holding up the election for the nation. And we're tired. We've just spent a lot of time administrating what we feel is a very successful election, and to also now field these calls and emails, it was very cumbersome. And then these are just some thoughts for improvement. Again, voter education, get out the word on what is same-day registration, what the different registration deadlines mean, and those extended election result timelines. we'd like to prepare a more robust election worker training program here in Carson City. Just due to all the new legislative mandates, it's time for us to revamp our training and get that a little more robust so that we're bringing them in to do more of the election administrative tasks, which will allow my staff to focus on more of the intricate issues that arise. And then we would like to streamline the same-day registration process. Again, 2020 was the first implementation of that. There were going to be hiccups. So we'll be working forward to streamline that, get some election workers who understand the statute, understand the requirements, and can focus strictly on that same-day registration process. I do want to note that that is going to take added IT support because these individuals are going to be accessing our voter registration software. So they need to take cybersecurity training. They have to have a multi-factor password. There's a lot of steps to bringing someone into that type of position for us. It's not something that we just give to every election worker. We're really relying on them with our live voter registration data. And with that, I did want to add that Carson City was also part of the risk limiting audit that we did, the pilot program here. And we too came through with flying colors, so that was exciting. And I want to give a shout out to all of our election workers. We were very fearful we weren't going to have enough. And with all the support from our different parties and groups here in Carson City, we had more than enough. And as Registrar Spicula said, we have a new batch coming in and we're really excited to work with them and bring their ideas on board to help us maybe refresh our election training program. So with that, I'm going to end it. I thank you for your time. I know it's late, but I hope this provides a little understanding of some of the limitations and concerns that face election administration from the rural county perspective.
Thank you very much, Secretary Rolat. And members, any questions for our clerk recorder of Carson City? Vice Chair Lane.
No, sorry, Mr. Chair. I was just giving a clap for a good presentation.
Well, thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you to our recorder. One question I have, I understand that the kind of voting machine you use in Carson City is different from the other counties. Can you just explain a little bit how that works, and has that presented any challenges for you?
You're correct. Yes, Carson City is the only county that is currently using the ballot marking device from Election Systems and Software. And I would say the biggest challenge it is that, you know, we as clerks and registrars meet regularly and we go over issues that we're facing. And a lot of times Carson City's having to come up with our own processes and procedures to fix issues that we have. So we work very closely with our vendor in that regard, and they're super supportive. But we love our equipment. We think that it fits our county very well. I have heard great feedback from our voters. In fact, I had someone come in today to tell me how happy he was that he got to see his choices on his actual paper ballot, which, you know, I found that to be, it was exciting because it is hard to stand out on your own on a different voting equipment from 16 other counties. I do think that all 17 counties in Nevada have a good system. I couldn't say one over the other. I just think that this one was a really good fit for our Carson City voters.
Thank you very much, Clerk and Recorder Rolat. Not seeing any other questions from members. I would like to go to Sandra Sam Merlino, our Nye County Clerk, to talk about elections in Nye County.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to speak. At this point, I should pretty much say ditto on everything. All the presenters gave so much information, and a lot of it is the same that I was going to give. So I'm just going to jump right into information on Nye County. As you're all aware, Nye County is huge. It's over 18,000 square miles. And I have county courthouses in both Tonopah and Pahrump. I have 5 employees in Tonopah that take care of most of my statutory issues like elections, voter registration, commissioners, and everything else. Pahrump, I have 6 staff members, and due to the large volume of court cases we have, they're primarily court personnel. So I don't have the ability to separate the duties in my office into certain, just registration, just court, or anything else. We all have to do everything. So it's quite a challenge for us. I do have 33 voting precincts. And when we speak of redistricting, right now, most of Nye County is in Senate District 19 and Assembly District 36. And then I have 4 small precincts that are in Senate District 14 and Assembly District 32. So it's kind of an odd situation. Most of Nye County is considered southern, other than the smaller areas in the north. Right now, we have 33,418 active registered voters and 3,885 inactive. We do use the Dominion equipment like the other 15 counties. We have 132 ICX tablets for voting, 26 electronic poll books. Now, as far as polling locations, this is where Nye County is a little bit unique, and this is where our biggest challenge is. I have 3 early voting sites. We actually added the Duckwater Reservation this last general election. So I conduct early voting in Pahrump, Tonopah, and in Duckwater. So just so you know, Pahrump and Tonopah, 170 miles apart. Duckwater and Pahrump are over 300 miles apart. So it's quite a challenge for my staff and I to conduct those elections, with that mileage. I have 5 election day polling locations, 1 in Round Mountain, Tonopah, Beatty, Amargosa, and Pahrump. This year, or for this last election, we actually had a vote center in both Tonopah and Pahrump where anyone can register to vote there or vote at those polling locations. I have 8 mailing precincts, Current Creek, Duckwater, Gabbs, Ione, Manhattan, Mercury, Sunnyside, and 40 Bar. These are all locations that have less than 200 voters. I'm not going to go over my election voter registration statistics. My backup is, you should have access to my backup, so I won't read all that to you. We did have a pretty decent turnout, though, for this general election. And in Nye County, voters love early voting. Even though we had more of a male turnout, early voting was still quite large. We do hire up to 50 election poll workers throughout the county. They work early voting and election day. For my smaller polling locations, I actually only hire about 4 to 5 workers. It's very difficult to recruit workers for those smaller areas. For Pahrump, I had people coming out of the woodwork willing to work, and I had to turn people away. So that's a difference in the county. Because of COVID, we were actually able to hire a few college kids, which is very rare for us because nobody stays in Nye County when they're in college. So that was very exciting. We used them in office and at the polling locations. Challenges and concerns. Aubrey hit everything right on the nail. Same things that are a challenge for us. But a lot of the things I want to reiterate, is the new technology is very difficult for poll workers. And it's hard. I would like to find a process to vet the workers more when they offer to work, to find out, are they technology savvy, whatever. But we do need a little assistance with that. I have issues training workers because I usually take a full week and I travel clear around the county trying to train workers. So I'm looking for possibly video training. I might borrow that from some of the other counties, just something to do a little better job training the workers. And so that I don't have to travel quite so much. I don't have the staff to do that. Transport and setup of election equipment is very difficult. For the general election, I actually could not find a large U-Haul to rent in Nevada. So we actually took 2 trips. We used a county trailer plus a smaller U-Haul. So those are just funny little challenges we have. We do have increased registration due to automatic registration, I think. So we have additional costs we have to worry about. A possible additional polling place in Pahrump. The schools really don't care for us that much. And so that is a challenge. Additional staff to handle same-day registration at polling locations. We processed over 500 same-day registrations and updates in Nye County. And I think it's because of our street files. our workers just were not able to process those updates or registrations. So I had to have a full-time staff member at the polling location just to handle same-day registrations. So we're going to have to work with GIS a little bit more to get into our voter registration system so that possibly we can train those workers to do those new voter registrations. So we'll have to see how that goes. As everyone else said, electioneering and campaigning, those were issues. We had to kick people off the premises. It's always an issue in Nye County, especially with local elections too. Third-party mailings are issues. And voter list maintenance. I get a lot of complaints about our voter lists because people think we should automatically be able to remove people just because they let us know somebody moved. I think the top-down system would be very helpful. We do have deceased voters, none who voted, but even though Vital Statistics we do get a report, they're not always timely. No matter what, I do have people complaining, oh, my husband passed away 3 months ago. Why haven't you taken him out of the system? So it's not timely. And I'm hoping with the vote or the top-down system, these things will be done just a little bit faster. And Nye County is very transient. We have voters that go back and forth between Clark County all the time. So it's a real challenge to keep up with those voters. Other than that, there were complaints in Nye County, mostly having to do with the mail-in election. I thought it was wonderful, but we literally had people throwing their ballots at us because they didn't agree with it. And that was kind of a challenge. That was a hard thing to deal with, the angry voters. But in the end, as you see, we had more mail-in voters than we did anything else. And I think it was a good thing, even though we did prepare for COVID. We had plexiglass shields for the workers. We actually had people cleaning machines in between every voter. We did have them separated, but unfortunately the lines were very long, especially during early voting, because we did have to clean those machines. Future improvements, as I said, training videos for workers, public outreach and voter outreach. I think people need to understand the election process a little better, as well as the voter history issues, just learning how the whole voter registration system works, the same-day registration. Other than that, I've been doing elections since 2000, and the primary mail-in was the easiest election that I have ever conducted in the whole time I've been in office. And this November election was probably the most difficult just because of the in-person and mail-in and COVID. So on that note, I'm happy to answer any questions for you. I know you're all tired.
Well, Clerk Merlino, thank you for presenting and thank you for making sure the election went forward in the primary and the general. Not only did you face the challenges of the pandemic and try to keep everybody safe and healthy, but you have such huge distances between the people you serve in Nye County. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Members, any questions for our clerk of Nye County, Sandra Merlino? All right, I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And the next item on our agenda is public comment. Before I go to public comment, I believe there were some questions earlier that we are very fortunate to have our Chief Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, Mark Voloshin, who's been patiently with us this whole meeting. And I think that there's some comments or answers to some questions he had that might have arisen earlier. The Chief Deputy Voloshin.
Thank you, Chair Arnshaw. Are you able to hear me all right? Excellent. Thank you. Again, thank you, Chair Arnshaw. Thank you, Chair Miller. Good evening, members of the Joint Committee. My name is Mark Voloshin, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, for the record. I promise I'll be quick this evening. There were a couple of points that came up earlier that I would like to at least address from a state point of view. I think the most significant, of course, being potentially allegations about fraud. Secretary Sagaski has been pretty consistent, I think, in her messaging about how there's been no evidence of widespread fraud in any part of the 2020 general election. That being said, though, I think her message is very specific, but perhaps needs a little bit of clarification. She does not say there is no fraud, and that's very deliberate. I'm not going to go into many details now, but I do want to stress that there were individuals, unfortunately, in our state who decided to make some bad decisions during the 2020 general election and have earned themselves a very stern discussion with law enforcement. Again, without going into specifics, I don't want to risk spoiling the integrity of any of those investigations, but there are some investigations that are underway to address some of the issues that I think have been raised not only by these committees, but by the public over the last few months. When the time is right, when law enforcement has done their due diligence and has gone through their processes, which of course are not nearly as expedient as many people would like them to be, but when they have done their processes properly, when they have applied the law, when we've identified, again, the individuals who are not actually guilty and done the proper investigations, then and only then, and law enforcement gives us the thumbs up, we'll be able to brief everybody appropriately on those steps that were taken. I know it's a little disheartening for folks to not hear more details about, but I just beg that, again, patience while the process is done, and law enforcement has a chance to do those things they would like to do. And along those lines, if anybody does have evidence of large quantities of deceased voters or some of the other allegations that we had heard about, I please ask that you do send that information to me. Secretary Sagaski has given guidance that we are absolutely to investigate every single thing that we get, period. And we have done so and continue to do so, not only within the state, but as mentioned before, using ERIC and some of these other systems and processes, interstate investigations as well. So again, no evidence of widespread fraud does not equate to no fraud. I don't want anybody to think that we're just sitting here blindly not doing anything. We're being very proactive and very diligent in our efforts. And that's something that, again, we've been doing with the very close coordination of all 17 clerks and their staffs and a number of law enforcement agencies that are on the Elections Integrity Task Force. Again, the phrase I keep using, the Elections Integrity Task Force, you'll hear it a bunch more, I suspect, before the session's over. But that is an organization, a team of law enforcement and like-minded individuals and organizations dedicated to making sure that our elections process is fair, transparent, and conducted in a legal manner. But Chair Orenshaw, that's all I had, unless there are any other questions from me.
Thank you, Chief Deputy. I appreciate your testimony. I'd like to now move on to the last item on our agenda, public comment. Public comment today is limited to 30 minutes. I do want to inform anyone who's on the line who is not able to participate that there is also the option to send in written testimony to the email address we mentioned earlier, sendloe@sen.state.nv.us, or via fax at 775-684-6500. Additionally, there's the opinion poll, which is available on the Nellis option on the legislative website. That being said, I'd like to turn it over to broadcasting and open it up for our 30 minutes of public comment. The speakers are limited to 2 minutes each.
Caller with the last three digits of 500. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello. Hi, Marcelo Morales, registered voter here in Clark County. I actually had one question as far as I know there was that close race that happened here in Clark County. For as far as votes or ballots that are adjudicated, so maybe there was an overvote or an undervote or whatever you want to call it there for a ballot. I'd just be curious what that adjudication process is, maybe who does it, and how does one, I'd like the science behind that if you could. Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much for your comment. We appreciate that you took the time and waited on the line to be on public comment. And that's, here, unfortunately, that's not a forum to ask questions, but we appreciate that you've shared that with us. And certainly, if you want to send an email, we can try to follow up with any either county or state officials, broadcasting whoever's next in the queue.
Caller with the last three digits of 264. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Tommy Pavlitich. My comments are that Nevada should be choosing electors by congressional district as they do in Maine and Nebraska. That's comment one. comment two, I'd like for the legislative committee to seek out and get published the cases of fraud that's been prosecuted. I haven't seen any prosecutions of the fraud, and without prosecution, there will be no deterrence. The third issue is no same-day registration. I've worked the polls for the last 6 cycles, primary and general, and I voted in addition beforehand. So I've been to the polls frequently as an observer, as an end user, not an observer, as a worker. The provisionals is what slowed things down in 2020, same-day registrations. It was a bloodbath. Where I'm in Clark County, there was no shortage either at the pre-voting that I went to or in the poll I worked at, the area I worked at. Plenty of workers. There was no COVID issues. We were further apart than you are going into a Walmart or most public places. So that takes me into the fourth issue. There should be no mail-in ballots as a blanket rule. It was a horrible law. It's not necessary, and it leads to another issue, and that is verification of signatures. It's very bad. If you can download a signature from the DMV that's not under 200 bytes, you can download the picture.
Thank you, sir. We're at the 2 minutes. Thank you very much.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 924. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
I don't have to. Hello, my name is Alita Benson, and I'm calling in. I worked on the Nevada Election Integrity team down here in Clark. There were 81,972 voters who had undeliverable mail in the 2020 primary in Clark County that should have been moved to inactive status once mail came back undeliverable. Joe Gloria admitted fault for these people staying on the rolls. However, of these 81,000 undeliverable addresses, 8,529 voted by mail. How was previously undeliverable mail in the primary deliverable from the same address in the general? And of these 8,529 ballots that were returned from undeliverable mailing addresses, 598 came from Senate District 6 and 1,303 came from Commission District C. I'd ask what additional safeguards were taken with these ballots, but thanks to whistleblowers from the Elections Department, they were told, and they told us under penalty of perjury, that they had to pass through ballots that appeared to be signed with a star symbol. These people put their lives and their word on the line to give us that testimony. So this is not an election with no discrepancies. These 8,529 ballots that came from undeliverable addresses is what the committee is tasked with investigating. So I ask you to do the right thing, investigate them, see who these people are, and see how mail that came from undeliverable addresses was returned. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 446. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Elzendia. I just want to reiterate what a lot of the Assembly people and senators have already said, which is I think that I live in Clark County, so I think Joe Gloria and his staff did a fantastic job of running an election in very challenging times. I personally serve on the counting board, so I understand the pressures that everybody was under. Obviously, Nevada came into the news late where we could have been the deciding state, and we were one of the deciding states, and that was a lot of pressure. But what Joe Gloria and his staff did from the very beginning was tell us that accuracy was more important than speed. And so I think that we did get a very accurate election, a very fair election, an election with integrity. I've served as a poll worker as well. I was really glad to see same-day voter registration because, as you can see from the numbers, thousands and thousands of people use that on election day. And to have to wait a few more days because of those provisional ballots, to me, is a small sacrifice considering that we got the most people to participate in our elections ever. So again, just want to reiterate that I think we did a fantastic job. Really glad to see same-day voter registration. Really happy to see mail-in ballots be an option. I know my family, we voted early. We used mail-in ballots. We dropped off ballots. We had people vote election day. To be able to have all those options available to people that would fit their needs, I think was a very wonderful thing. And it was very concerning to me to hear one of the senators allege about these deceased voters.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I believe you're at the 2 minutes. Could you spell your name so that we can have it accurately for the record?
Sure. Did the other callers need to spell their names, or were they easy to spell?
I think there was one who did, but we'd like to have your name accurate in the record. So if you could spell your name, we appreciate your comment.
No worries.
Have it accurate.
No worries. Just want to make sure that it's fair for everybody. I did not hear anybody else spell their name, but my name is spelled Stephannie. Last name is spelled ALV as in Victor, ENDIA.
Thank you for your comments.
All right. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 264. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 264. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yeah. I called in again. I already spoke for 2 minutes. Last name is Pavletich, so I'll cede my time.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 016. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes. Eddie Hamilton, as in Alexander Hamilton. Eddie Hamilton and Henderson. I want to say that many of us think our democracy is broken. The election sometimes is rigged, but we can never get resolution because this is a highly partisan issue. So my suggestion is for the Secretary of State and the Registrar of Voters to appeal to the United Nations, to the international observers, to be sent here. For decades, America, we've been going all around the world, beating up on people, telling them they don't know how to run elections. We're the best. We're the god of democracy, which is a joke. Because election has become extremely partisan in America now. So my suggestion is to get a team of international observers, the United Nations, to come here to Nevada and other states and monitor our election system. We need to do that. We're no longer the best democracy in the world. We've got 10,000, 20,000 people and troops in Washington, D.C. That's worse than Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, the Chinese communists beat up on free speech movement. We're doing the same thing here. America and the democracy is broken here. We need international observers to come to Nevada to monitor our election. Joe Gloria, that's a joke saying that signatures are easy to verify. That is a joke. And Barbara Sagevsky, for many months, we've been talking to her staff. They are not serious. They're not serious about investigating election irregularities. That is a fact. Just talk to anybody. This is highly partisan, so we need the UN. We need the UN to come here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 018. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Chair, committee members. My name is Jim Sullivan, JIMSULLIVAN, and I'm here representing the Culinary Workers Union, Local 226. We would like to applaud our state's election departments for their outstanding work during the 2020 general election. Despite dealing with a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, our election officials were able to develop an effective system that allowed Nevadans to vote in a safe and secure way, whether it was by mail or in person. On top of that, they ran an open and transparent mail ballot counting system despite facing threats and protests from those who sought to overturn the election results. Once again, we would like to applaud our election officials for an outstanding job during the 2020 elections. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 028. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 028. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 050. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Amy Nelson, Nelson is my last name. Ammie is my first name. I was a volunteer to call people whose ballots were rejected for some reason, and I called several hundred. And by the way, I give my kudos to all of the clerks for doing the best job they could do under the circumstances. And if I have any grievance, I will take it to the assemblymen and the senators who make the laws they have to follow. But getting back to the point of calling people that had their ballots rejected, some of these people had moved out of state. Dozens of these people had moved out of state and were unaware that they had to call or report that to the Secretary of State. And some of these were county officials that had moved out of Nye County that were totally unaware that they had to do this because it's never been a mandatory mail-in ballot system in Nevada before. I saw a lot of problems that came from mail-in ballots. And myself, I'm pretty computer literate, but I misunderstood and thought everybody had to mail their ballots in. So that could be one reason why there were so many mail-in ballots, because most people thought that's the only choice that you had in the beginning. And then as time went on, I realized, oh, geez, I could have gone down and done this in person. So it's not just because everybody loved mail-in ballots. Most of the people I spoke to did not like the mail-in ballot system. And the other thing is the signature verifications. Those are done by checking the signature on file at the DMV. And we all know that when you go down and get your driver's license, you don't have to prove where you're from. I could be from China, and I could have an address in Clark County or Nye County or Washoe County, and they won't check that. They don't know if I'm a registered legal voter in the United States or not. So just because you have a registered a vehicle or a driver's license to drive doesn't mean that you're a legal voter. So I think a lot of the problems came from that verification.
Thank you for your comments, but we're at the 2 minutes. GPS, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits, 104. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 104. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is Maria Teresa Lieberman Parra, MARIA-TERESA, last name LIEBERMANN-PARRAGA. And I'm here representing Battleborn Progress and also myself as someone that observed the process in Clark County, which was masterfully executed by Registrar Gloria and the rest of his staff. And just to say thank you to them, and also to say that this was a process that was very meticulous, very accurate.
and that if it wasn't for the people doing this work every single day, we wouldn't have had such a great election, which even at the national level, folks have called it the safest, most secure election that we've ever had. And so I just wanted to say that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. BPS, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits, 126. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 126. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 161. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 161. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 224. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jody Regenhart, JodyRegenhardt. And I had seen a video, a news report, where there was some cash for votes schemes. I think there were some Visa gift cards involved, specifically at our Native American reservations. And I'm hoping that these potential felonies are being investigated and that we will receive some sort of report. I'm sure I'm not the only one that saw these videos. And just to express some concern in that matter, as well as our non-citizens that may be voting via GMV. And also look forward to an investigation and a report into how many of those non-citizens voted and had their votes counted. Thank you.
Thank you. BPS, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits, 328. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 328. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 414. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Armanino, MarilynArmanino. Thank you for taking my comment. I would also like to thank the members of the committee, in particular, Senator Gansert, Assemblywoman Dickman, and Assemblyman MacArthur for their hard work and for listening to their constituents on this and many other issues. There can be no greater priority than ensuring that our elections are held fairly and that the results of those elections are met with the confidence of Nevada's voters. I am encouraged to see the legislature taking the needed steps to familiarize our elected officials and the public with how our elections are administered. What we need next is to ensure that our registrars of voters across the state are given the necessary funding, training, and equipment to do the job well. We also need to dramatically raise the level of confidence in our elections in the eyes of the voters. I am a resident of Clark County, and I appreciate the work done by Mr. Gloria and the monumental test that the 2020 election was. However, it is not okay that after almost every other county had finished counting their ballots, we still had days of counting left to do. The country watched as Nevada seemingly struggled. Again, I'd like to reiterate that I am not blaming Mr. Gloria or anyone in particular. What I am saying is that we can do better. We are a great state, and Clark County is a great county. I just want to represent that greatness in everything we do, particularly in things as important as our elections. There are a great many things on which we as Democrats and Republicans may disagree, but surely when it comes to efficient, fair, and transparent elections, we must all agree. Moreover, we should all agree to properly equip those charged with our elections. Thank you very much for allowing me to offer my comment, and thank you again to the committee for your work on this issue.
Thank you. BPS, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits, 101. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
There are a great many things on which we as Democrats and Republicans may disagree, but surely when it comes to efficient, fair, and transparent elections, we must all agree. Moreover, we should all agree to properly equip those charged with our elections.
BPS, I can't really, I'm having trouble hearing the caller. If the caller can speak up more louder, otherwise I think we have to go to another caller.
Caller with the last three digits, 101. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 126. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, this is Eric Early. That's E-A-R-L-E-Y. My concern is over how the public feels about the integrity of the elections. And it's a real concern. In my practice, I meet with a lot of clients that have a deep passion about the election. And they feel, many of them feel that there was fraud and that it wasn't just in a small amount. They feel the fraud may be oriented around the signature verification. The fact that you don't have poll challengers right up where they can see the signatures. They're too far away. They need to be able to see them to have confidence that that process is being accurate. And the problem I really fear is that the passion is so intense with some of these people. And it's intense with me, too. I feel there was fraud in the election. But the passions are so intense that this could blow up. There are only two pressure release valves in our democracy: free speech and elections. And when you have, it doesn't matter whether it's government or big tech suppressing free speech. When you get shut down out of Twitter and shut down out of Facebook, and I know that's not anything you can control, but you have to understand how these people feel. If they get blocked in one way and then they feel that the elections are tampered with, you're going to have an explosion. You're going to have people that are really, really angry. And we saw what happened at the Capitol.
Mr. Early, we're about 15 seconds. You could wrap it up, then we have to go to the next caller.
Sure. In summary, or just to finish, it's not whether it's invalid or not. People's feelings are not invalid, and they feel this way. There's a lot of that 75 million people that feel this way. Take it seriously. Make it so it feels like there's an election integrity. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 419. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, yes. My name is Benjamin Challoner, BenjaminChallillor. Thank you, Chairs Orenshaw and Miller, as well as the members of the Joint Committee. I am the Policy Director for Faith in Action Nevada. We are a multi-faith, nonpartisan organization that organizes and advocates for racial justice, economic justice, as well as an inclusive democracy. I would like to applaud the county registrars as well as the clerk recorders across the state, in particular, Registrar Spicula, as I am a Washoe resident and voter, on an amazingly run election. There were no evidence of rampant voter fraud, and even though as many would like to think, we should be continuing to encourage and making it easier for folks to vote, not discouraging it. And I really hope that this body, along with their respective houses, please do so by making these changes permanent. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 430. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is John Rando, R-A-N-D-O. I just have a couple of quick comments. First of all, we used to have a pretty good voting system here in Nevada till this new bill took effect. So possibly we should go back to what we used to have. This bill obviously has caused more problems with the public's perception, and probably the other problem that we would have is Mr. Gloria says that he sent his signature verification to 40%. I just have to say, I don't think I want to get on an airplane that said 40% of the time it lands safely, the other 60% of the time you could die. So we have to look at things in a much clearer way. I think that the best thing to do would be to go back to what we had before. Nobody seemed to be challenging it at all. Everybody seemed to be happy. As far as the reports of probably about 3,800 or so non-citizens voting, well, that is a problem that we need to deal with no matter what. That would be my immediate concern, and I would like to see that addressed by both the legislature and the Senate. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 506. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 506. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 527. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Fergus, K-I-M-B-E-R-L-Y, Fergus, F-E-R-G-U-S, and I am calling in as a citizen activist. I personally worked on the Nevada election integrity team that got investigated the voter fraud in Clark County after the 2020 general election. I am calling because what Joe Gloria said is not true. It is wrong for unelected officials to unilaterally set and change policies at a whim. In Clark County, Joe Gloria made himself the king of determining residency provisions, and they seem to be changed based on your political party. In the first week of early voting, he followed the law as laid out by NRS 293.5837, which allows a variety of means to establish residency when voting. The second week of voting, that changed. Joe Gloria said you must have a Nevada ID. Thousands of complaints came in. Voters were not allowed to vote because they didn't have a driver's license. DMV was backed up till January 2021 for appointments. It was all hell. But then Joe Gloria changed it again on Election Day and said, you can prove residency with a DMV appointment. And of course, if you had uncertain residency, you had to vote provisionally. So thousands of provisional voters were forced to vote presidential-only ballots when Joe Gloria's department changed the rules arbitrarily and broke the law. According to NRS 293.2081. Anyone who votes provisionally is entitled to vote for all offices upon which they hold and to vote on a regular ballot, except 60,000 voters in Clark County were put on provisional. Many were not told they were provisional.
You've got 15 seconds left.
Had his people, people break the law, offer them a ballot with presidential votes only, please. As elected officials are allowed to break the law with impunity, please do the right thing. No amount of voter fraud is acceptable. Thank you for your time.
And BPS, I believe we can take one more caller, and then we've used up our 30 minutes.
Caller with the last three digits, 842. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is David Gibbs, Gibbs. First name David, David. We've heard an awful lot today about from the callers about fraud and other issues, and I believe that the clerks did what they did as best as they could given the laws, and that's where the problems lie in the 2020 election. What was done with AB 345 in 2019 and what was done with AB 4 has created a lot of uncertainty and has lowered the acceptable risk level and reduced the trust that people have in the election outcome. Allowing ballots to be delivered, received, and counted 5 days after the election with postmarks that are questionable or non-readable, that just moves it away from good. Allowing people who are not having accurate ways of verifying the citizenship of people or the eligibility of people to vote at the DMV moves it away from good. Those are things that you guys need to consider. As a previous caller said, we had a good election process in 2018. And then with AB 345 and AB 4, you guys changed that. And now we wind up with some of the mess that we've dealt with in 2020. COVID aside, that doesn't change. Those things will still exist in 2022. And so you need to take a good look at that process and determine, do we really want to accept ballots after the polls are closed? Do we really want to accept ballots where the postmarks are unreadable or in question? Those are all things that you as the legislature need to decide to lower the risk and increase the level of trust that people have in the outcome of the election. I believe that the clerks did the best that they could given the situation and given the laws that they had to follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibbs, and thank you, broadcasting staff and members, for your attention to the hearing. We'll now close public comment. Anyone who's waiting on the line who was not able to call in, please, you can email your comments or fax them to the email address, the fax number mentioned earlier. It's also on our Nellis page for the Senate Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections and on the legislature's website. In closing, I just have a brief comment. Today, more than ever before, disinformation has become the weapon of choice aimed against our citizens. This dangerous disinformation creates fact out of fiction and has filled our country with division at its center. The most recent disinformation, that the November 2020 election was inherently fraudulent, is perhaps the most shocking in the absolute absence of fact to bear it out. In Nevada, as in the rest of the United States, there has been no proof of any widespread voter fraud. There is no proof because there was no fraud. Our Nevada Secretary of State, our county registrars of voters and clerks, and judges across our state who have presided over multiple election challenge cases in the months after the November election all arrived at the same conclusion, that our elections are fair and secure. On January 7th of this year, the day after the deadly insurrection that took place at our nation's capital, our Secretary of State released a statement in response to the attack. And I quote, "What transpired January 6, 2021 was not only devastating, but heartbreaking. Nevada's election officials performed their duties with integrity and fairness, and to have the results be rejected by many Americans is disheartening and clearly of great concern. As a state and a country, we are better than this. I ask all Nevadans to respect the outcome of this election." Today, I echo those sentiments, and I call on my colleagues to not perpetuate misinformation and false allegations of voter fraud. As elected officials and leaders in our community, we have a duty to tell the truth and build an atmosphere of public trust in our elections and in our government. That trust has been breached by lies and disinformation over the past few months, and it's time we come together to rebuild it. Thank everyone for their participation, and with that, I'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.